We always mention life under Sir Alex Ferguson for Manchester United, but this tells a real story here. The same amount of group stage exits under Sir Alex Ferguson since his retirement. If we look at this a bit deeper, they were double winners going into the 1994-95 season. Heavy defeats by Barcelona and Gothenburg. That was a group that also included the side they've just had in their group now, Galatasaray. They went out the group stage in 2005-06. United managing only one win, 2-1 at home to Benfica. That group included Villarreal and Lille. And they finished third in 2011, 2-1 defeat in Basel. United finished third there. And as you can see there, so it's been very, very mixed since Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement. But, of course, when you finish third now in the Champions League, you do get that Europa League spot. United have finished bottom. No Europe for them. Gents, I'm looking at the groups. When the group stages came out, we all liked Newcastle's group, other exciting-looking groups. When this was pulled out, I said, well, United are bound to be in Europe. At the very least, post-Christmas, they're out completely. That's unacceptable, isn't it?
Well, I think certainly when the group stage draw was made, it was maybe not unacceptable, but certainly unthinkable that United would be out of Europe at this stage of the season. But, you know, United going out wasn't down to the result last night. It was down to how they've played throughout the group stages. The damaging result against Copenhagen. Galatasaray, I think you can throw in there as well, although United did play quite well in certain parts of that game. I mean, if you're looking at where things have gone wrong, it's a case of, you know, how long have you got for Manchester United at the moment? Phil Barsley touched on it a little bit earlier on in the show. The ownership situation still ongoing, over a year since the situation was put out there that they're looking for outside investment. Wasn't a full takeover. Now they just want to sell a little bit. That's still not been ratified with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. We've talked so many times about a lack of structure at Manchester United. No sporting director. Seems like no long-term vision. The club's in a state of flux until the Ratcliffe situation is resolved. And that has impacted recruitment over a long list of managers at Manchester United. And then you come down the chain to Erik ten Hag, who, let's be honest, inherited a bit of a mess at Manchester United, turned them around somewhat last season. But since February, their form has pretty much nosedived, I think it would be fair to say. I think some United supporters think that there's been some muddled team selection along the way this year. Part of that, I think, is down to injuries, but certainly players who were on the fringes at the start of the year. And actually, we were talking about players that potentially United were willing to let go in the summer and now front and centre in Erik ten Hag's plans at the moment. So lots of things ongoing at Manchester United and plenty of things for whenever this new ownership comes in, they have to think about.
Yeah, the knee-jerk reaction in football is always get rid of the manager, isn't it? But if you look at the history of Manchester United since the 19th of May 2013, just over 10 years. He's the eighth, if we include caretakers, the eighth person in charge in just over 10 years. And it's still the same problem. So if you keep doing... Einstein said if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. And is it just as... It's not just as simple as changing Erik ten Hag, is it?
No, I don't think it is. And as you say, this is the cycle they're in. You know, a new manager comes in, he's allowed to bring in his own players, then he goes. Next manager is left with a bit of a muddled squad, and that does seem to be a recurring problem for Manchester United. I mean, I think he'll understand that he's under pressure. You know, any Manchester United manager who loses 12 games before Christmas is going to be under pressure. You know, that's as many as they lost in the whole of last season. But you know, it is that question of whether you go through this cycle again. I suppose the worry is that Erik ten Hag has maybe added to the problem in some sense, because a lot of these players who he has sort of brought in haven't been, you know, they haven't had the desired impact. So you are potentially perpetuating this issue with the squad. It still doesn't look any closer to being a kind of balanced and functional squad. So that's an issue. But obviously there are issues above Erik ten Hag. There are issues with the decision-making processes, with recruitment that they need to sort out. You know, it does go a lot deeper than the manager, I think.
Injuries keep getting mentioned, Michael, so they're not alone in having a lot of injuries, Manchester United, but is theirs particularly tricky for them?
Well, it's going to be very difficult, isn't it, Rob, for Manchester United when they face their great rivals, Liverpool. But as you mentioned, Rob, all clubs have got injuries, especially at this time of the season. But how much is it affecting Manchester United? Just looking at the names, we know what a key player Casemiro was, particularly last season. Questions about his performances this season, sure. Christian Eriksen, another senior member of that midfield. Malacia's proved to be a decent signing. Lisandro Martinez out. This is the one that's going to annoy Manchester United fans. Of course, Saturday was a disaster against Bournemouth, but that booking means he's suspended for such a huge game. Was a real disappointment to supporters. Mason Mount hasn't really started his Manchester United career yet, has it? Lindelof, we all know about Jadon Sancho, but these two here are the key. These are the real worries as well for Manchester United. What a turnaround it's been for Harry Maguire. He looks like he'll be out of Sunday's match, as will Luke Shaw. Doubts remain over Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford. Guys, I'm going to bring it back to you, OK?
It's a great turn.
Yeah. Throw you under a bus. But no, is that an excuse, really? Is it an excuse for the performances?
I think it's a mitigating factor. But what I think it has done, it's played a part in the lack of cohesion and the lack of connection and the lack of identity on the pitch. I don't think Erik ten Hag has been able really to field his first choice starting 11 at all this season. And when he has almost got that first 11 out there, it's felt a little bit imbalanced, particularly in midfield. I think the injuries towards the left-hand side of the pitch with Luke Shaw, Lisandro Martinez has really impacted the way they want to open up the pitch and get the ball to Marcus Rashford. His form has nosedived and has been a real problem for Manchester United this season. And then, up front, you look at Rasmus Højlund, who looks like a player that might do well for United in the future. But he's having to shoulder the goal-scoring burden at the moment. And you have to consider, when United signed him, the reasonable kind of worst-case scenario for Højlund coming in was that he was going to struggle to adapt. Now, I'm not saying he has struggled to adapt, but the difficulty in him scoring goals has meant that the pressure has kind of built in other areas of the pitch. And I think the injury situation hasn't helped that.
It doesn't help when he's not given the ball just outside the 6-yard box in space and the player has the shot rather than... Anyway, let's not go there. Out of Europe and the League Cup, 10 points off the league leaders. It begs the question, is this season salvageable for them from this stage in what is success?
Well, I don't think you can be writing off the season now. So much football still to play. But I think going out of Europe, going out of the Carabao Cup as well, it puts more pressure on the competitions you have left, doesn't it? So on the one hand, you have a freer schedule. Maybe you can get more players back. Maybe you can manage your squad a little easier. But you are adding pressure to what you have to do in the tournaments you are in. And I think that is a problem for them. And obviously the injuries are a problem too, as Michael's just mentioned there. But what you have to say as well is that even when their injury list was a little bit lighter, the performances weren't great, were they? They've struggled for consistency throughout the season, really. And so for example, Casemiro being missing, obviously a big player for them. He was struggling at the base of midfield, just like Sofian Amrabat did at times last night. It's an issue not just with personnel, but with style and structure of the team. The number 6 is invariably getting left isolated, and that's a huge problem. So these are issues that need to be resolved on the fly now in the middle of the season for Erik ten Hag, and that's going to be difficult. But I think it is salvageable. A 6-point gap to the top 4 is not fatal, is it? They've obviously got a hugely difficult game this weekend, but there is something they can play for. There's plenty for them to play for this season, so they can't be throwing the towel in yet by any means.
Yeah. A longer-term defeat on January the 8th at Wigan would be cataclysmic, you would think, in some ways, but Anfield nearer on our agenda. How fearful will United fans be considering what we've seen in the recent past?
I think they'll be a little bit worried, Manchester United fans today, going into the weekend. Liverpool have looked pretty good in recent weeks, although not entirely convinced as to how good this Liverpool team is. But I think United are going to be very nervous going into this game, United supporters anyway. If we think about salvaging the season, I think if you offered Manchester United supporters top 4 and an FA Cup, feels a long way away right now, but if you offered them that at the start of the season, I think a lot of Manchester United supporters would have gone, yeah, OK, we'll take that, and that's another kind of building block for Manchester United. Right now, I think the only success that United supporters would see this season is if Sir Jim Ratcliffe's 25% investment is ratified.